sitting nearest to him on the bench. Not the legendary names who would weigh in days later with the specific gravity that former greats bring to moments they recognize as belonging to the permanent record of the sport. Nobody expected it because nothing about the moment suggested it was coming. Ohtani had just been replaced. Lifted for a pinch hitter in the 7th inning of a game that was still alive, still within reach, still carrying the competitive tension that makes late-inning decisions feel like they matter in the way that only close games make things matter. He had walked back to the dugout the way he always walks back to the dugout, with the unhurried, internally directed quality of someone whose outward composure is not a performance but a genuine condition of his competitive psychology. No visible frustration. No body language that communicated disagreement with the decision. Nothing that gave the cameras trained on him anything to work with except a man walking calmly from one place to another. He sat down. Pryor was 2 seats away. And then Ohtani said the thing that Pryor would describe later, in the conversation that became the story that the baseball world spent the better part of a week discussing, as the most unexpected sentence he had heard in a dugout in his entire professional life. The 7th inning had arrived with a specific set of circumstances that made the pinch-hitting decision reasonable even if it was not inevitable. Ohtani had already contributed offensively earlier in the game, a contribution that, taken in isolation, would have represented a successful night for most players. But the at-bat that awaited in the 7th carried a specific matchup dimension that Roberts and the coaching staff had discussed during the previous half-inning with the focused efficiency of people who have limited time and complete information and need to convert one into a decision using the other. The reliever coming in threw left-handed. Threw hard. Had numbers against left-handed hitters that represented one of the most significant platoon advantages currently active in the league. The pinch hitter going in threw right-handed. Had numbers against this specific pitcher, not against left-handed pitchers generally, but against this pitcher specifically, that the Dodgers' analytical staff had flagged as meaningful. The decision was defensible. Possibly correct. The kind that managers make in the 7th inning of close games when the information available points in a direction and they follow it. Ohtani accepted it without visible reaction. Walked to the dugout. Sat down. And said what he said. Pryor heard it clearly. He was close enough that there was no ambiguity about whether he had received it accurately, no possibility that the noise of a baseball stadium had distorted something into a different shape than what it actually was. He turned and looked at Ohtani. Ohtani was not looking at him. He was watching the at-bat unfolding on the field, tracking the pinch hitter's approach with the concentrated attention he brings to everything that happens in a game he is part of, regardless of whether he is actively participating in it. Pryor said, "What did you just say?" Ohtani said it again. Same words. Same tone. Without the defensive adjustment or the softening that people sometimes apply to statements when they realize they have been overheard and are now being asked to account for them. Pryor sat back. He would later describe the next 30 seconds as the 30 seconds he spent trying to decide whether what he had just heard was what he thought it was, whether the sentence contained what it appeared to contain or whether he was mapping his own interpretation onto something more ambiguous than it actually was. He concluded it was exactly what he thought it was. And he didn't know what to do with it. What Ohtani said was this. He said, "Would have hit him." 4 words. Past tense. Stated not as complaint or protest or the expression of disagreement with a managerial decision. Stated as fact. With the calm certainty of someone making an observation about the physical world rather than an argument about a strategic choice. I would have hit him. Pryor understood immediately why the sentence was unexpected. It was unexpected because Ohtani almost never speaks about his own capabilities in declarative terms. He does not predict outcomes. He does not assert what he will do or what he would have done or what he is capable of in the specific, confident language of an athlete performing self-belief for an audience. His relationship with his own ability is expressed through the work rather than the words, through preparation and execution and the accumulated evidence of what he actually does rather than what he says he will do. Which meant that when he spoke this way, when he used this particular form of declarative certainty, it was not a performance. It was a report. Pryor sat with that for a long moment. Then said, quietly, "I know. The at-bat ended without the result the Dodgers needed. The pinch hitter, despite the favorable matchup numbers, did what baseball hitters sometimes do with favorable matchup numbers, nothing with them. A strikeout. Clean. The kind that happens when the information is right but the execution doesn't follow it. The inning ended. The game continued. And in the dugout, Ohtani watched the rest of it with the focused, forward-oriented attention of someone who has filed what happened into the appropriate category and moved past it. He did not return to what he had said. He did not elaborate or revisit or in any way indicate that the 4 words he had spoken were still occupying the front of his mind. But Pryor was not able to move past them as cleanly. He spoke about it 3 days later. In the specific setting that produced the conversation, a media session that had begun as a routine pitching staff availability and had been redirected by a reporter who had heard, through the particular grapevine that baseball media cultivates, that something had been said in the dugout that was worth asking about directly. Pryor confirmed it without hesitation. He said he would have hit him. And I want to explain why that stopped me. Because it wasn't about the decision. He wasn't criticizing the decision. He wasn't telling me that Roberts was wrong or that the analytical matchup was misread. He was simply stating something he believed to be true about his own capability in that specific moment against that specific pitcher. He paused. He said, and the thing is, I believed him. That's the part that stopped me. I've been around elite hitters my entire career. I've watched the best offensive players of my generation prepare and compete and fail and succeed. And I've learned to recognize the difference between what an athlete says about themselves and what they actually know about themselves. He said, Shohei knows himself. Completely. At a level that most athletes spend their entire careers trying to reach and never quite get there. When he says something like that, when he uses that kind of language about his own capability, it's not confidence in the ordinary sense. It's information. He's telling you something true. He looked at the reporter. He said, that's what stopped me. Not what he said. The fact that I knew it was true. The legendary pitchers came after. Not all at once. In the distributed way that former greats weigh in on significant baseball moments, through interviews, through the broadcast platforms that employ them as analysts, through the social media presences that modern retired athletes maintain as a connection to the sport they spent their lives inside. What they said, taken together, formed something more coherent than individual opinions. It formed a consensus. One said, there are hitters who believe they can hit anyone in any count in any situation. Baseball history is full of hitters who believed that. Most of them were wrong often enough that the belief remained a belief rather than becoming a fact. The rare ones, the truly rare ones, the belief was actually knowledge. And you could tell the difference because of what happened when they stepped in. Another said, I faced hitters who scared me. Who changed something in my preparation because I knew that my margin for error against them was smaller than against everyone else. That specific quality, of being a hitter who genuinely reduces a pitcher's margin, is the rarest thing in the sport. Rarer than velocity. Rarer than any tool. Ohtani has it. Everyone who has ever faced him knows he has it. The third said something shorter than either of the others. He said, if Ohtani says he would have hit him, he would have hit him. I don't need more context than that. I don't need the matchup numbers or the pitch sequence or the analytical breakdown. I need those 4 words. Because I know what those words mean coming from him. Roberts was asked about it at his next availability. He said, I make decisions with the information available to me in the moment. Sometimes the information points one way and the outcome goes another. That's baseball. A reporter said, do you regret the decision? Given what Ohtani said afterward. Roberts said, I make the same decision in the same situation with the same information. That's also baseball. He paused. Then said, but I'll tell you something honestly. When Pryor told me what Shohei said in that dugout, I sat with it for a while. Because Pryor believes him. And I've learned that when Pryor believes something about a pitcher or a hitter, there's usually a very good reason. He looked at his notes. Then said, let's just say the next time that matchup presents itself, I'm going to think about it a little differently. Ohtani was asked directly. A reporter approached him after practice with the specific courage that the question required, because asking Ohtani to elaborate on something he said quietly in a dugout and did not intend for public consumption is an act of journalistic boldness that carries real risk of a door closing. The door didn't close. Ohtani listened to the question through his interpreter. Then said, I said what I felt. I felt it clearly. I don't always feel things that clearly in that situation, against that kind of pitcher, in that count, with that much on the line. But in that moment I felt it. He was quiet for a second. Then said, that's all it was. A feeling I had. That turned out to be something I didn't get to find out if it was true. The reporter said, does that bother you? Ohtani thought about it. Then said, a little. Yes. He almost smiled. Then said, it'll come around again. It always does. And he walked back to the work that was waiting. As it always